faith and confidence. I want to thank the mayor for his welcome as well. I want to thank Wayne for all his hard work on our behalf here. Before we get going, I'd like to ask everybody to just stand for a minute, if you would. We had a tragedy in our country this evening. 4 United States Marines were killed in Tennessee tonight at a recruitment center by a gunman who was also killed. We still don't know all the details, and we'll wait till we hear about all those details. But the one thing we know for sure is that 4 United States Marines are dead tonight, killed while they were attempting to recruit others to their cause. And so I just ask us to bow our heads and take a moment of silence to pray for them and for their families who are suffering tonight. Thank you all very much. Please be seated. You know, usually when I'm on my way to a town hall meeting, I go through in my mind kind of where I want to start, what I want to talk about, and it's usually a relatively easy process for me. Tonight, there's so many different things that we could talk about, and then I could start by talking about. I don't know exactly where to start, but I'm going to start with 2 things tonight. And then leave it be and let you ask me questions about what's on your mind. The first thing is to talk about what I think is become now the most serious and dangerous issue that has entered into our country's conversation and entered into this campaign. The president's decision to sign the deal he has signed with Iran is, in my mind, in what is undoubtedly a failed presidency. This is the worst thing, in my mind, this president has done in his nearly 7 years as president. It's extraordinary to me that if you look at where we started in these conversations with the Iranians and where we've ended up, you can't come to any other conclusion than that American national security is going to be put at risk by this agreement, and just as bad, that the existence of Israel is going to be put at grave risk because of the signing of this agreement. And if I were the Prime Minister of Israel tonight, or any Israeli citizen, I would be asking myself, what happened to our American friends? What happened to the people who stood up and fought the war to end the Holocaust? What happened to the country that stood with us in wars throughout the 60s and early 1970s? What happened to the idea that an American president would stand with Israel to protect its existence, no matter what? This president lives in his own world, and let me give you the greatest example of it. And I said yesterday the president is lying to the American people, and I don't use that word lightly, especially when it relates to a president of the United States. But he is flat out lying to the American people about this agreement. He did it 2 mornings ago. Erica and I woke up, we turned on the television set, laying in bed in New Jersey, and saw the president at 7 a.m. on television 2 mornings ago. And he said to us, we're not relying upon trusting the Iranians for this deal. This deal is built on verification. And he said to us, key nuclear sites can be accessed anytime, anywhere. And previously, his aides had said that they'll have 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week access to nuclear sites in Iran. What does the agreement really say? It says we can ask to go and look at a site, then the Iranians can object. And if they object, it then goes to an arbitration panel. And the Iranians have a vote on the arbitration panel, as do the Russians and the Chinese. Then they have 24 days to make a decision. Now listen, I'm a former prosecutor. So that would be like if I went to court and got a search warrant to search one of your homes, and that the judge said there is probable cause to give you a search warrant to go and search the house. And then I came to your house and I said, hi, how are you? Here's this search warrant. I believe you're engaged in crime. I'll be back in 24 days to see if I can find any evidence. I got to tell you the truth. If you were engaged in that crime, I got a feeling when I came back 24 days later, that evidence would be gone. This is what the president says is sufficient verification. for a country that is the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world. And on top of it, in this agreement, he has allowed for the arms embargo, conventional arms, to be lifted against Iran in 5 years, and the ballistic missile program to be released in 8 years. Now let me tell you something, everybody, you don't need ballistic missiles to shoot warheads at Israel or Saudi Arabia or Jordan. Ballistic missiles are the intercontinental kind. Those are the kind that, if they're developed correctly, could shoot from Tehran to New York, from Tehran to Washington. This president has agreed to allow the Iranians to have this type of program in 8 years. Now, I have to tell you, I wouldn't let this guy buy a car for me, let alone negotiate an arms deal with Iran. You know, the way he's negotiated this would be like if you went in to buy a car tonight after you left here, you went into the car dealership and you said, listen, to the salesman, hey, listen, I am buying a car tonight here no matter what. Now let's negotiate price. Or if you looked at the car salesman, you said, listen, I'm not going to pay sticker or over sticker, but if that means I don't get the car, let's talk about it. I mean, no one would go in and negotiate to buy a car that way. Yet this president conceded at every turn to the Iranians, and now what he says is, this is the best deal we could get. And he says to all of us who object, you come up with a better idea. Well, let me give it to you tonight, Mr. President. You want a better idea? Here's a better idea. Do what Ronald Reagan did. Do what Ronald Reagan did. And any of you who haven't read this book, I absolutely suggest you go out and read the book by Ken Edelman on Reagan's meeting with Gorbachev at Reykjavik. For those of us who are old enough, I am, to remember this, President Reagan met with Premier Gorbachev at Reykjavik, and he walked away from a bad deal. And he was roundly criticized for it by the media and liberals in this country who believed that President Reagan wanted to blow up the world. He walked away because it was a bad deal. And what happened? A year later, the Russians came back to the table. And then Reagan negotiated a better deal. This president had the audacity, and I shouldn't be surprised because the name of his book was The Audacity of Hope. The name of that book should now be The Audacity of Failure. After 7 years as president, he had the audacity in an interview with the New York Times yesterday to compare himself to Ronald Reagan and to say, Reagan negotiated with the Soviets, why shouldn't I negotiate with the Iranians? He doesn't even understand what we're objecting to. We're not objecting to negotiating with the Iranians. We're negotiating to giving it away. And that's what he did. And so I said 2 days ago when this deal was announced and I got briefed by my policy team about the contents of the report, I said this is now on Congress. You know, we have a system, our founders set up a system of checks and balances, giving authority to the legislative branch and to the executive branch to check each other. We have the ability to do that. The Congress should reject this deal, and when the president vetoes it, which, by the way, how about this moment 2 mornings ago? The president said, I welcome an open and robust debate in Congress. And then he said, and if they turn it down, I'll veto it. Well, so are you really, your ears open, Mr. President? Do you really want to listen to an open and robust debate, or is that just the talking points your staff put in front of you? And then you can bet he wrote in red pen, and I'll veto it. And I'll veto it. Well, guess what? This is not a Republican or Democrat issue, everybody. The sheriff said, you know, we got to learn to work across the aisle. And he's right, and I've done that in New Jersey, but you know what? On national security, there shouldn't be Republicans and Democrats. There should be Americans. Americans. And in my state already, a Democrat has stood up and said no. Senator Bob Menendez has stood up and said no. This is a bad deal. I hope that other Democrats stand up and do exactly the same thing based on principle. You know, this has got to be about principle over party. We've got to make that decision. And so I think the Congress should take the president up on his threat. Turn down this agreement with sufficient numbers the first time around to let the president know that a veto would be futile, and send him back to the negotiating table as the leader of the free world that he should try to be, and get us a better deal, and not put America at risk and not put Israel at risk. Second thing I'll just talk to you about briefly is I gave a speech today before I came up here in New Hampshire and New Jersey, in Camden, New Jersey, on the issue of criminal justice reform. And in the same way that we've come up here to New Hampshire and given really specific speeches on entitlement reform and tax and regulatory reform and Americans' foreign policy and national security, and on education reform, which we gave out in Iowa, we've given very specific things that we want to see done, and I gave very specific ideas today about reforming our criminal justice system. 25% of the world's prison population is imprisoned in the United States. Now, this is not a distinction I think we want to keep. And the fact is, I am a former prosecutor. I am all for putting in jail and keeping in jail violent criminals. You committed an act of violence, you're a sociopath, and you deserve to go to jail and to stay in jail for a very long time. And we need to keep our streets safe from these folks. But nearly 50% of the prisoners in our federal prisons today, as we speak, are nonviolent drug offenders. And the fact is that most of those folks are drug addicted. We know that no matter how well you try to run a prison, drugs get into a prison, they get smuggled in, and these folks remain addicted, and then they're released from prison. 650,000 people a year are released from prison. And what happens if we release that drug-addicted person back onto the streets without the tools to deal with their addiction? What happens is they go right back to their addiction more times than not. And that leads to more criminal acts and back into prison. Families torn apart, neighborhoods torn apart. And we need to deal with this in a smarter way. Listen, the war on drugs, when it began, was well-intentioned. It was well-intentioned, but it has failed. It's failed because we thought we could incarcerate our way out of this problem. We have learned, I believe, we can't. And the way to do this is to deal with drug addiction in the way that it was meant to be dealt with. It is a disease. Now listen, I think everybody in this room would admit at some point in your life you've made a bad choice. You've made a bad decision, a decision you look back on that you regret. I know I have, and I'm sure most of the people in this room, if not all of us, have. We're fortunate that the bad decision we made didn't lead us to a life of addiction, but it could have. It could have. And when we want people to give up on us, when we want people to think that we were a moral failure because we made one bad decision in our life, we're forgiving people in this country. And we care deeply, I believe, about the preciousness of each human life. I'm pro-life. And I believe in the sanctity of human life. But you know, it's not just when that child is in the womb. It's easier to be pro-life when the child's in the womb. They haven't done anything to disappoint us yet. Right? Pro-life becomes a lot harder. A lot harder when they come out. And Mary Pat and I have 4 of them. We know. Fact is, though, if you're pro-life, you can't just be pro-life, in my opinion, for the child in the womb. You need to be pro-life for the 16-year-old drug addict laying on the floor of the county lockup. Because that life is a precious gift from God, too. Now, we've instituted in New Jersey, and the sheriff alluded to this, we instituted drug court across our entire state. And what's happened in the 2 years since we've instituted this? In the course of my administration, the prison population, the state prison population in New Jersey is now down 31%. 31%. And how about this? Recidivism, which nationwide is running at about 56 to 58%. In New Jersey, recidivism is running at 16%. Wow. Now, the fact is this can work because we're putting saving and salvaging lives ahead of the idea that we should be punishing for everything. But let me be clear, violent criminals need to stay in jail, go to jail, stay in jail. And you know, when I became governor of New Jersey, do you know a judge in New Jersey couldn't deny bail to someone even who had multiple violent previous convictions? The only way they could deny someone bail in New Jersey was if they were at risk of flight from the jurisdiction. But if they were long-time violent actors, they had to give them bail no matter what. They'd go back to the streets. If they were gang members, they'd go back and intimidate witnesses, destroy cases, commit further crimes. So I got the Constitution in New Jersey changed, along with the members of the legislature, in a bipartisan way, to give judges the authority to say, if you see someone with 6, 7, 8 prior violent convictions, keep them in jail prior to trial. Don't send them back onto the streets. But by the same token, I said, if you're a nonviolent offender and you can't get out of jail because you have to have $250 to post bail, and you don't have it, so you wind up staying in jail longer than you would have ever served if you were convicted of the crime you were charged with, then that's a debtor's prison, everybody. That means we're jailing people because they're poor. That's not the right thing to do in America either. So we changed the Constitution also to say, no, for nonviolent crimes, the judge has the ability to release someone on their own recognizance. We don't want to have debtor's prisons in this country. In the same way, we don't want to have our streets filled with violent criminals who are kept on the streets because judges don't have the discretion to put them in jail. Those were all bipartisan accomplishments that we worked together with Democrats in the legislature to get done, to be smart about crime. The way to be tough on crime is to be smart about crime. And we need to apply these rules and these lessons all the way across our country. There's no reason that a president who's a former U.S. attorney, who's prosecuted criminals, who knows about the criminal justice system, can't pick an attorney general and, with the president, advocate for these type of smart things to lower our prison population, but to increase the safety of our streets, to lower the despair that goes along with drug addiction by giving people an opportunity for treatment with federal drug courts across the entire country, and increase the hope that families have. Because I'll end with this and then take your questions. This can happen to anyone. This is not just a disease of the young or the poor or the less educated. It can happen to anyone. I'll end by giving you this example. I went to law school back in the mid-1980s, and one of the people in my study group, for any of you who went to law school in this room, that's that group of people, that small group of people you get together first year with, who you're scared to death with, because you're afraid, I'm never going to be able to figure this out, I'm going to get kicked out of here, and you all band together. For us, it was a group of about 6 of us, and we studied together all the time. We figured, well, it'll rise or fall together. The smartest guy in that group was a good friend of mine who went to an Ivy League school undergrad, came to Seton Hall Law School back home in New Jersey. He became one of the editors of the Law Review. He got the best paying job of any of us when we got out of school. Became a partner before any of us at one of the biggest law firms in our state. Married an absolutely beautiful woman who became a doctor. They had 3 beautiful daughters. And he was an incredible athlete on top of it, being really good looking too. He really got us all angry. And he used to run mile after mile every week. He was in great shape. He loved to fish. He was just so active all the time. And then during one of his running times, he hurt his back. And he was in a lot of pain. He would not concede to have gotten older a little bit and mellow out a little bit on the running. So he went to the doctor to deal with his pain. And he got Percocet. And he started to take Percocet and he got addicted. And we all, a group of us, after a while, his wife called us, his friends from law school, and said, I need help. I don't know what to do with him. Because as he started to take the pain medication, he started to drink too. And so we had an intervention with him. And he was in denial. We got him to go to treatment. And for the next 10 years, he was in and out of treatment, recovering and falling back and recovering and falling back. His wife divorced him. He lost his job. He lost his driver's license. He lost his home. And ultimately, a little over now 2 years ago, Mary Pat and I got the call we never wanted to get on a Sunday morning. They found him alone in an awful motel room with an empty bottle of Percocet and an empty quart of vodka, dead. Dead at 51 years old. If you looked at my friend's life, you would say he had everything that defines success in America. A great education, a great job that paid him a lot of money, a beautiful, loving, successful wife, 3 beautiful, loving daughters. Everything that we would define as success. Yet drug addiction caught him and killed him. And he's gone now, and those girls don't have a father anymore in their life. It can happen to anyone. There, but for the grace of God, go I. And we have to understand that in this country and stop placing a stigma on this disease and start treating it. It won't work for everybody. It didn't work for my friend. We lost him anyway, but every life we do save will make a better husband or wife, a better father or mother, a better son or daughter for our society. So that's why I spent time in camp today talking about these things, because I think they're important for our country's future. We need to get on top of this and get it done, and we need a president who's willing to lead to do it. So I'm going to stop there and take your questions. There's only one rule in my town hall meetings. You raise your hand, I call on you. And you ask me whatever you want. We don't get you to write down your questions beforehand. We don't let my staff pre-screen them to only let me answer the ones that I want to answer. Right? You just raise your hand. But the one thing we don't do is we don't answer yelled out questions. This is not because I'm a candidate for President of the United States and the Governor of New Jersey. This is because I am a father of 4. And you all know that you yourselves as parents have developed a very keen ability to be able to ignore things that are being yelled at you. I've developed that same keen ability. So in New Jersey, when we go to work, we take off our coats. So I'm going to take off mine, and then we're going to get to work. So raise your hand, and I'll take your question. And by the way, I'm sorry, I forgot to introduce the First Lady of the state of New Jersey, my wife Mary Pat, is here with me today. And she has volunteered to hold my coat. So, thank you. All right, questions? Yes, ma'am.
I'm concerned about Obama's $1 trillion plan to modernize our nuclear weapons deal. And I think the people who benefit from this deal are those like Lockheed Martin and Sandia Labs were just cited by the Department of Energy Inspector General for using taxpayer dollars to lobby for more taxpayer dollars. And if you're elected, what will you do to end this cycle of governing under the influence? And if contractors are using our taxpayer dollars to lobby for more contractors, how do we end that cycle? And
I love when she asks me these questions. Here's the thing. First off, let's talk about the subsidy issue, then we'll talk about the process part that you asked about. First, on the subsidy issue, you do have to make sure at points in our history that we modernize that nuclear capability, because if we don't, it's dangerous. It's dangerous. So we should make that decision not based upon lobbying from any defense contractor or from any lobbyists, but we should make that decision based upon our military leaders giving advice to our civilian leaders about the level of dangerousness that will occur for us, because these missiles, as you know, are not only in submarines, but they're also land-based missiles across the United States. And we don't want any of those nuclear warheads or those missiles to launch or detonate by mistake. So I think we need to periodically invest in making sure that we modernize those things so that they're useful to us if, God forbid, we ever needed them. But just as importantly and more likely, to make sure that we avoid any type of accidental problem that would lead to a lot of destruction and perhaps death as well. Now, on the lobbyist part of this, you know, the fact is that our country has become a place that is awash with special interests that have the money to be in Washington, D.C. and ask for things. You see it in what you're talking about with defense contracting, where sometimes decisions are made not based upon what weapon system we need, but based upon what weapon system is being sold by the most influential lobbyists. We see it in our tax code, that there's all kinds of special interest loopholes and deductions that regular Americans don't use, but that folks have a lobbyist in Washington, they get it for them. The only way to stop that stuff is to have a president who says no. Now listen, lots of presidents don't like to say no, right? Because usually when they say no to people, they don't smile. And you know, we're in the business of wanting to make people smile and make them happy, because if we make them smile and happy, maybe they'll vote for us. I, fortunately for you, are from New Jersey. Which means I have absolutely no problem with saying no. And on a regular basis, and have said no on a regular basis in my state. Let me tell you how. In my state, after 5.5 years as governor, I have vetoed more bills than any governor did in 8 years. I've already vetoed more bills and said no to more ridiculous things that have been popped up by special interests and people who are, you know, being paid to influence the government than any governor in New Jersey history. And because I've worked hard with my colleagues in the legislature on the Republican side, we have not had one veto overridden in 5.5 years. You need a president who is willing to stand up and say no to things that make no sense. And the type of influence that you're talking about makes absolutely no sense. It doesn't make sense for the taxpayers. It doesn't make sense for the right way to run our country. But the only way that's going to happen, you know, if you try to corral all 535 members of Congress to stop this, you're going to have a long wait for that. So my point is, we've got to have a president who's got the guts to stand up and say no when no needs to be said, and to be willing to stand up firmly and work with both parties to be able to find people with common sense who will back up that no. And if you do that, then I think we have a much better chance of being able to control what goes on in our government. Yes, ma'am. There's a microphone for you so everybody can hear you.
And you said that we should raise the age of Social Security. Anybody here want to work a couple extra years? Why not just really rich people pay the same amount as middle class people? Why shouldn't they have to pay Social Security on their full income?
Well, because my plan says they shouldn't get Social Security.
But why are you asking middle class people to work longer? It doesn't seem fair.
No, well, what will be less fair will be when Social Security goes bankrupt.
If the government would pay Social Security back, it wouldn't go bankrupt.
Well, that's very true. But this is the Huckabee argument, okay? Huckabee's saying we shouldn't make any changes to the program because that would be counterfeiting, lying, and stealing by the government for the American people. Let me tell you what's happened. The lying and stealing has already occurred.
Right.
The lockbox is empty. All it's got is IOUs in it. All the money that's coming in the payroll tax is being spent by the government on other things. And then the government puts IOUs into the Social Security fund and pays them by borrowing money from the Chinese. But let me explain to you why 2 years. Remember something. I'm saying increase Social Security retirement age 2 years and phase it in over 25 years. Phase it in over 25 years. That means the only people who really be affected by this ultimately are people who right now are 42 years old. 42. You know, that's plenty of time to plan for an extra 2 years of work.
But you shouldn't have to.
Well,
because
but you do have
if
to.
the really rich people paid on their full amount of their earnings, just like us in here have to do.
There are not enough rich people in the United States, nor enough money to be able to fund what we would need with a growing population to be able to have that be the only way you can solve this. Listen, I go through this in New Jersey all the time, with all due respect. Everybody says, raise taxes on somebody else.
I'm not saying raise taxes. I'm just saying
That is raising taxes right now.
Okay, that's what
Right now we have a cap. Right now we have a cap. Everybody is capped. Everybody is capped. That is a tax increase on everybody who makes over the amount of money where the cap is right now. It's a tax increase on those people. And there's no other way to put it. It's a tax increase. Now, listen, if you want to advocate for a tax increase, we can have an honest disagreement about that.
It's always going to be a tax increase. When is somebody going to stand up for the middle class and say, you guys have paid enough. You've put enough in. let the 1%ers or whoever they are.
It is. That's right.
You know,
It's one. You know, listen.
This trickle down thing isn't working.
Well, I don't know what's trickling down right now because
Nothing.
wait a second. Under this president and his policies, which have been
This president,
well,
he's done everything bad.
No, I didn't say he's done everything bad. And by the way, you know, I have stood up when I had to and when I thought it was right and worked with this president.
Yeah, when
right?
he was giving you money.
No, you know, and I'll tell you this. I think that most people in New Jersey would be offended by that statement by you.
How much
No,
money?
wait a
How
second.
much Sandy money have
finish.
you given to New Jersey people, and not just your friends?
Let me finish. My friends. You know, listen. I'm more than happy to have a debate with somebody who knows what they're talking about.
Well, and I
but
know
I have to tell you the truth.
Because
I have to tell you the
sit
truth.
down and shut up. Right?
No, I didn't say that. But if you want to say that to me, feel free. But the fact is this: that the Sandy money that came to the people of New Jersey was tax money that the people of New Jersey have contributed to over a long period of time
and so,
to the people of the United States.
And
by the way, listen, are you running for president? Because I'm not here to debate you. I'd like to answer your question. And if we're going to continue to go back and forth like this, we're not going to get anywhere. I do not agree with raising taxes to pay for Social Security. I agree with reforming the program. You disagree. I agree. That whenever a natural disaster occurs anywhere in this country, that the American people should stand up and help those people who have been destroyed. Well, no, you just took the position that somehow the people of New Jersey, when he was giving me money, he wasn't giving me anything. He was doing his job as President of the United States to stand up for the people in my state that was damaged. And in return, I treated him with the respect that the President of the United States earns and deserves. But it doesn't mean I can't disagree with him.
Promises to the people of New Jersey. How can we expect you to keep your promises to
well,
the
I would argue too that I have not. And you know, you have your opinion, I have mine. That's what makes this country great. I suspect that given what you've said, I'm probably a long shot to earn your vote. But that's okay. I'm glad you showed up anyway, because you know what? We've had all the press writing that my meetings here have been getting too boring. So I'm glad you showed up to spice it up a little bit. I appreciate it. We have a fundamental disagreement, and I'm sure in this group of folks, whether it's on the Republican side or the Democratic side, you'll find somebody you do agree with, and when you do, I hope you support them vigorously.
I will.
Good. Thank you very much.
Could you tell me, if you were elected president, what would you do about Obamacare? And what would you do to bring down the costs of health care in this country? I'm a retired RN, and I'll tell you, I have seen examples of waste and over-treatment, just in my experience. And so I can, multiply that times thousands and millions of times. What concrete ideas do you have for reducing overtreatment and dealing with Obamacare?
Sure. Let's go backwards. So in dealing with overtreatment, I think I spent the first 7 years of my life, in my career, as a lawyer defending doctors and nurses in medical malpractice cases. And I will tell you that I found in many of those cases where I defended physicians and other healthcare providers that it was the fear of lawsuits that led to a great amount of the overtreatment. That folks were concerned that, well, if I don't order this test, or I don't do this type of treatment, or I don't order this medication, that if I get sued or something bad happens later on, I'm going to wind up being criticized. So let me do everything.
So are you in favor of tort reform?
I'm in favor of tort reform, absolutely. And I think it should be a national issue and should be done nationally. We shouldn't leave it to the states anymore on this, because the lobbyists for the trial lawyers are much too powerful. You look at my own state. When I suggested tort reform in my own state, I met in the first 2 weeks or so of my governorship with the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Now, this is a guy that any bill on tort reform would have to go through, a Democrat, and I knew he was a lawyer. So I said to him, so, Senator, I said, what kind of law do you practice? And he looked at me and he said, I'm an ambulance chaser. And I said, so I laughed. Well, yeah, I laughed because I thought he was kidding. And he said, why are you laughing? I said, so I assume tort reform is a long shot. And he said, never going to happen, Governor. What happens is we need presidential leadership on this to reform the system so that healthcare providers provide the care they think in their judgment is necessary. And to remind everybody that a doctor or a nurse is not a guarantor of a result. Sometimes bad things happen. And despite the best care you can get, sometimes bad things happen. We should not have a healthcare system that's based upon doctors and nurses acting defensively, which leads to the overtreatment you're talking about and the enormous amount of wasted money in the system. Now, on Obamacare, let me say this, and also, by the way, we should get away from the fee-for-service model, which encourages people to perform more services to get more money. We should have a system that pays people what they're worth, what their value is for the services they provide, not to check more boxes on a form so you can get more money. So those are two concrete ideas on over-treatment. On Obamacare, I think we need to go away from a federal model and go to a state-based model. And here's why. And we should say the states have to do this, but they need to develop a system of their own. Look at the state of New Hampshire versus the state of New Jersey. You have about 1.3 million people in New Hampshire. It is a state where the population can be spread far out. You have a lot of people in the North Country, far away from healthcare. Often, and the problem with access to healthcare in New Hampshire often is distance. In New Jersey, we have 8.9 million people. In the most densely populated state in the country, the most densely populated state, one of the most urbanized states in the country, and the most ethnically diverse state in the country. Our problem for access is not about distance. You can't walk 4 or 5 miles without tripping over a hospital in New Jersey. All right? They're everywhere because you've got so many people in such a confined space. Our problem for access is cost. Right? So why would a system that works for New Jersey work for New Hampshire? Two different sets of challenges. You know, I'm not a big fan of your governor, but listen, I trust the governor and the legislature in this state to make the determination as to what kind of healthcare system will provide the best healthcare for the people of New Hampshire for two reasons. One, because they're closest to the problem, and two, because if you don't like it, you can kick them out. Much harder to kick out a president and a majority in Congress. But you can move pretty quickly here in New Hampshire and have back and forth over times to Republicans and Democrats to be able to do that. We've done it in New Jersey, too. We should count on the governors and the legislatures in the states to come up with a plan. So my plan on Obamacare would be to get rid of the federal one-size-fits-all system and go to a state-based system. Let the states make these decisions. And then the people can respond to those folks that you see at your local deli and at the movie theater and at the library and at the Little League game or the soccer game, where you can go up to your state rep or your state senator and say, listen, this isn't working for me and here's why. Try to do that with the President of the United States. Try to do that with the Secretary of Health and Human Services. It's not going to happen. And so that's the way I would deal with the Obamacare issue. Make it a state-based program rather than a federal program. Thanks for your questions. Those are great. Yes, sir. Right over here. Right behind you.
Oh, okay.
You get your own microphone here. We're first-class operation.
I usually have a loud enough voice.
Yeah, me too, buddy.
What I'm concerned about is what you were talking about first off. It's this deal that Obama has made with Iran. Now, my question is, and I have no idea what the answer is, but is this deal going to be dependent is the country going to be stuck with this after he's out of office?
Well, listen, here's the practical answer to that. Is that, of course, the next president is going to have the opportunity to evaluate this deal and decide what he or she wants to do. But remember, we had other allies involved in this too. Great Britain, France, Germany, and the Russians were involved, and the Chinese were involved with the Iranians. And the European Union as a whole, right? So each of them had representatives. So the job of the next president is going to be to evaluate whether this agreement's been complied with. If it hasn't, to try to execute on the agreement to make sure that sanctions get put back in place. But you're going to have to work with our allies. And right now, our relationship with our allies across this world are so deteriorated because this president hasn't kept his word. I mean, think about the fact that the president said he's drawn a red line in Syria. If Assad uses chemical weapons on his people, we will take him out. But Assad used chemical weapons on his people, and the president said, never mind. And so the Saudis, the Emiratis, the Jordanians, the Egyptians, all of whom feel threatened by the alliance between Iran and Syria, now don't even know whether they can count on us anymore. See, I don't know whether I would have drawn a red line in Syria or not if I were president. I don't know. But I'll tell you this. If I had drawn a red line, I would have enforced it. Because the word of the President of the United States has to matter. It has to matter. So you've got to be careful when you do it. But when you do it, you've got to be willing to follow through. And so I think the problem for the next president is going to be, how do you deal with this deal? There are some people who are saying on day one, I'd walk away from the deal. Well, that sounds good. But what else is going on in the world on day one when you get there? And if you walk away from the deal where our allies come with us, I think you'll need to do some work as president first. I'm not saying I wouldn't walk away from the deal, but I think I have to talk to the British Prime Minister first, maybe. Maybe I'd like to talk to the President of France first, maybe the Prime Minister, the Chancellor of Germany. Maybe we need to talk to our allies first, not just go off on a toot, and sit down with them and say, is this really working for us? And do we need in a united way to do it? Because the only thing that brought them to the table was a united set of sanctions. And Congress pushed those sanctions and got it done, and the president worked with our allies to get them imposed. He should have walked away. He should have walked away. And sometimes you get so intent on wanting a deal, and you've all been involved in this, whether it's a negotiation to buy a house or whether it's a negotiation to sell your business or whatever it is. Sometimes you get so deep into the negotiation, you forget what the goal is. The goal is not to get a deal. The goal is to get a fair deal. And the president didn't do that. So I will tell you this, I'm opposed to this deal. And if I were president, I would work as hard as I could to make sure that we got a better deal for the American people and for the state of Israel. Because they're counting on us. And it's wrong. It's wrong that we've abandoned them. It's wrong that this president has done more abuse. He doesn't stand up to anybody on the world stage except for the Prime Minister of Israel. He's the only guy who really, gets it from the president. And that's just, I think, not right for somebody who's the only democracy in the Middle East. And the place that stands up for freedom and liberty and has always stood by the United States. So that's the way I deal with it, strongly, directly, decisively, but also working with our allies. Because if we don't work with our allies, it's not going to work. Right? We got to do this stuff together. Yes, ma'am. Got it. Go ahead, ma'am.
I'm just wondering how, in this day and age, I read a letter to the editor this morning, it kind of sparked something, that this country has moved towards a culture of dependency. And if you were to become president, how would you move us away from that culture of dependency and more back to being non-dependent or independent?
I think there's lots of little things you can do. I think there's two big things you can do. The first one is the president has to speak in ways that allow people to aspire to great accomplishment and achievement. My first vote, I turned 18 in September of 1980. I entered college in September of 1980. And my first vote was for Ronald Reagan in November of 1980. And the reason I voted for Ronald Reagan was because he made me feel like I was going to have a chance when I got out of college. That he was going to help me have an opportunity to do something great. Jimmy Carter, remember at the time, was telling us, we're in a malaise, the country's moving down, turn down your thermostats, put on a sweater, the country's going to hell in a handbasket, right? I mean, and Ronald Reagan said, no, the American people are great people, but we have to work hard together to aspire to great things. What Mary Pat and I have tried to teach our children is that this country guarantees you nothing other than an opportunity to be whatever you can be. An opportunity, not a guarantee of a result. This president wants to guarantee results. He wants to determine who the winners and losers are, and his language sounds like that, because he's always pitting people against each other. If you have more, that means that I have less. No. In America, everybody can have more, based upon the ingenuity of your ideas and the quality of your work ethic. That's what's always determined greatness in this country. So that's the first thing that we need to do. The second thing is that we need to get a regulatory system in this country that no longer encourages people not to work. but encourages people to work. For instance, how about the Social Security Disability Insurance Program? Now, that's a great program for people who are truly disabled and can't work, to be able to make sure that they don't have to live in poverty. But you know that program's about to go bankrupt next year. Not 8 years from now, not 12 years from now, next year. And what the president is saying, he's going to steal money from Social Security to pay the disability program. What I've said about that is the way to reform that program is to say, listen, if you have an injury, an illness that allows you to be disabled, first thing we need to do is get you on a rehabilitation program. And then to execute on that rehabilitation program and try to get you back to work. You know that in some months of this administration, more people have signed up for Social Security Disability than got a job. And those are the issues that you're talking about. But in Europe, what they've done is to say you've got to get a rehabilitation program, you've got to execute on the rehabilitation program. And what I would add is, I'd say to any business who lost an employee to being disabled, who then that employee goes on a disability program, I'll give you a tax incentive to take that employee back when they're healthy. We want to encourage work. We want to honor work again. And I don't think we've done enough of that so far. We need to honor and encourage that. So it's opportunity and letting everybody know. My mother used to say to me over and over and over again, Chris, if you work hard enough, you can be whatever you want to be. She didn't say if you just get up out of bed every morning, America's going to give you what you need to be successful. She said to me, if you work hard enough, you can be whatever you want to be. And she turned out to be right. She turned out to be right, because for my whole life, I've worked hard. And here I am now having a chance to run for President of the United States. Hey, everybody, whatever your goal is, whatever your dream is, this country gives you an opportunity to do it. And I think we have to start talking like that, not just from the President of the United States, but all the way down the line. And we need to be saying it as mothers and fathers and sisters and brothers too. But it starts with the President. And the attitude the President has can set the tone for the country. And I would talk to the country the same way my mother spoke to me. I'd say to any young person in this country, you can do whatever you want to do if you're willing to work hard enough. That's the magic of this country. And that's what we got to start talking about again, except rather than who gets what and what's fair. And my mother used to say, life's not fair, man. Life's not fair. Life's tough. Get tough and fight. Go out and fight for what you believe in. Fight for what you want to get in your life. Work hard. That's what we need to be saying once again in our country. And then people understand that they do have an opportunity for greatness. That's the way we get off of the downward slide that we've been on, and we get back up to an ascendancy. That's what we're looking to do. Yes, sir, right there. I will. Okay. He's going to get you one.
Thank you, and welcome to New Hampshire. I'm sorry I left 26 years ago in New Jersey, but I still visit.
You're not the only one, buddy. Where'd you leave from?
South River.
South River. Beautiful Middlesex County. All right. The home of Joe Theismann.
Yes, sir.
South River, New Jersey. Absolutely.
1 square mile.
Been there. Been there. Got really hurt by Sandy, South River, so I spent a lot of time there.
Seaside did real too.
Yes, it did. Yes, it
Visit.
did.
I'm talking about veterans. My era, Vietnam era, suffered from Agent Orange. The new veterans suffer from traumatic injuries, loss of limbs, and everything. And I watch TV, and I see Wounded Warrior Project on TV. Why? Why aren't we taking care of the veterans? Why aren't, instead of buying Obama phones and free internet and all this other stuff we're giving away for free, buy that soldier that motorized wheelchair so he can get around. And if you give somebody charge of the VA, and if he don't do the job, fire his ass. Just like you do in civilian jobs. If I don't do the job, my boss fires me. Obama gives the guy a job, he doesn't do anything, he says, I'll give you a raise next week. But we really, I go to the VA in Manchester, and they do an excellent job. But there's other places that don't.
Sure. And
we really got to fix it and put the money there.
Well, first of all, you can never tell that guy's from New Jersey, right? you can never tell. Glad you fronted that. I would have asked you. I've talked about a couple of things regarding veterans. First of all, we made a promise to veterans that when you join the military and put your life on the line for our country, to serve, that we were going to take care of your health care for the rest of your life. There were no buts. There were no maybes. That was the promise we made. And the VA has fallen down on this and failed veterans in a major way. It's a national disgrace. And the fact that they also lied to veterans and lied about the care veterans were getting and the waiting times and all the rest of that was just a scandal. And it took a long time for the president to finally fire Shinseki and to put someone else in there who's trying to fix it. Now, I'll tell you this. I don't believe this system of just exclusively VA hospitals is working anymore. And I think if you've made a promise to veterans, you need to do this. You need to give the veterans a card that allows them to go to any healthcare provider anywhere in this country to get medical care when they need it. That's the promise we made to them. And that's the promise we should keep. Doesn't mean we should eliminate veterans hospitals. Some of them may have to be eliminated, but over the long haul, they also can provide some very specialized care, as you know, that allows veterans to be taken care of. But those veterans should have the right to go wherever they want, whenever they want, to be able to get the care that they need. And let me tell you what we've done in New Jersey to try to make sure that we keep that promise. First, this year in this year's budget, we've joined a partnership with the trauma centers in our state, the hospital trauma centers in our state, to say, we're going to provide same-day care for any vet who shows up. If a veteran shows up and says, I have not been able to get care at the VA, to any one of our state trauma centers, they're going to say, you get your care here right now. The state's going to pay part of that cost, and the hospitals, out of their philanthropic dollars, are going to pay part of that cost. And that's a program that I think is the beginning of what I'm talking about for the country. Because there are lots of patriots who are healthcare providers who would want to contribute some of their own money to help these veterans, in addition to government money, but we're not given the chance to do that. Second, there's a program that we started in New Jersey that was funded by the federal government called Vets for Warriors. It's a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week hotline that was run out of Rutgers University Hospital in Newark. For any veteran, anywhere in the country, could pick up and dial a number, and they could get another veteran on the phone when they're having mental health issues. And that veteran could then refer them to a mental health provider. For some reason, in this year's federal budget, they decided to cut that funding out for that program. And so when I found that out, I went to our state legislature at the very end of our budget session, and I said, we cannot let this happen. And initially folks said, well, let's just make it for New Jersey veterans. Well, that's not good enough. And so the state of New Jersey, the taxpayers of New Jersey, are going to pay next year to continue, starting July 1, to continue the Vets for Warriors program for any veteran anywhere across the country. Because I don't want that program to go away, because we know that a disturbing number of veterans, especially from the Iraq and Afghanistan theaters, have come home and because of post-traumatic stress disorder have committed suicide. Every time we let that happen, it's a disgrace. And so we're keeping that program in place as well, and the state of New Jersey is going to fund it for the entire country. And we're going to do it because we feel that strongly about the fact that we need, and it's not just me, this is again, like the sheriff mentioned, a bipartisan effort. I went to the two Democratic leaders of the legislature and asked them about this, and I have to give them credit. It was Steve Sweeney and Vince Prieto. They didn't for a second hesitate. They said, Governor, you're right, that's the right thing to do, let's put the money in. Democrats and Republicans did it together. That's the way you lead in this country, and that's the way the VA will ultimately be fixed. Because there are Democrat veterans, Republican veterans, independent veterans. We don't ask them for their party affiliation when they sign up. We just ask them to be loyal to the Constitution and the flag of this country. And in return, we need to show them that same loyalty. So that's the way I would start to approach it. Last piece, of course, is to put a qualified, smart business person in charge of the VA who will run it like a business healthcare provider. Find one of the operators of the major hospital systems in this country, recruit them, appeal to their patriotism, and say, we need you to come and run the VA and help clean it up. I think if we get someone like that, then we can have the best of both worlds, and our veterans will get the care that they need. So that's the way I would approach it. Thanks for bringing it up. I appreciate it. Now, this young lady in the back has a question. She's been waiting patiently.
So she's a little shy.
That's okay.
But she wrote it down. How will you take care of people?
You know what? What's her name? Elizabeth. Elizabeth, the most important job of any leader is to remember that you serve the people who put you there. So the way to take care of people, I think, is to first always tell them the truth, whether they want to hear it or not. Second, to make sure that every day when you go to work, you think about what can I do today to help give the people who I work for a chance to have a better life. The third thing is to always remember that folks like you, how old are you, Elizabeth? 5, excellent. That folks like you are going to take care of folks like me when I get old. And so I better make sure that you're as smart as you can be, that you get the best education you can, and that you know that if you work really hard, that this country is going to allow you to get the really great things that you want to get in your future. And that when you do that, you'll also help to take care of me too. That's the way you take care of people, is to be honest with them, to work hard for them, and to remember that the younger people in this country are the future of not only our country, but of the rest of the world in keeping a stable, peaceful world. So thanks for writing down that question. That's really good. And I appreciate you coming tonight, Elizabeth. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming back to Franklin, Governor. Our military's current status is the result of a long succession of decisions made by commanders-in-chief who had no experience or little experience with the military. What is your strategy going to be so that you don't succumb to those pitfalls, because our military needs help right now?
First thing is to talk to smart people who know more than you do. Right? I mean, you can't, no president is going to know everything about every subject that's going to come across his or her desk. It's impossible. It's too big a country, it's too vast a country, and too complicated a set of problems. So the first thing you have to do is make sure that you have smart people around you who are going to help to educate you in all the different areas that you are. And over the last year or so, I've spent a lot of time with a lot of really smart people, experienced people, talking about America's military. And that's why when I came up here to Portsmouth and I gave a speech on America's role in the world, a large part of that was on what we need to do for our military. And here's what I think we need to do for our military. This president just announced again another reduction in the number of soldiers in the Army. Another 40,000 soldier reduction. You know, this doesn't make sense. We deter war by being strong. Weakness has always led to conflict, because that's when other people think they can take advantage of us. And so the decline in the Army, I've said we should have no fewer than 500,000 active duty soldiers in the Army. No fewer than 185,000 active duty Marines. We are on our way right now to a 260-ship Navy, the smallest Navy we've had in recent memory. I think we need to bring that back up to a 350-ship Navy. We need to modernize the Ohio class of submarines so that we can make sure that the waterways around this world are safe for peaceful trade for all countries around the world, and to protect the assets of the United States and our allies. And we don't need a 50% reduction in the Air Force, which is what the President is recommending. We need to get our equipment up to 2,600 airplanes. And we lay all this out in detail. It's on our website at chrischristie.com. And we went through, and I went through that, because I understand that the only way to keep the peace in the world is to be strong. Is that when they know, I mean, right now, you know if you read this today in the papers, but it's clear that the Iranian leaders knew that the president didn't think he had a military option to combat them getting a nuclear weapon. Well, when they don't think that option's on the table, it's going to be harder to negotiate with them. And so, you know, we are asking a lot of the men and women who put on the uniform. We need to make sure they have the equipment they need, and that they have the comrades they need by their side, on their left, on the right, in front of them and behind them, to be able to effectively protect our country. And so those are the things that I would do for the military from both a hardware perspective and a personnel perspective to make sure that we get back where we need to be in this country. Man in the back. Matt's making his way around.
How do you feel
there you
about
go.
sanctuary cities?
Yeah, well, I talked about this today in my speech in Camden. If I become President of the United States, I will advocate with the Congress to pass a law which does not permit there to be sanctuary cities for felons in this country. It doesn't make any sense. You know, this is... This is part of a culture. This is part of a culture that's going on right now. People think that they only have to enforce the laws they like or agree with. All right? So we have a law in this country against marijuana. We say marijuana is an illegal drug, yet the federal government is permitting certain states, like Colorado and others, to say, but in our state, marijuana for recreational use is legal. The federal government says it's illegal, but the federal government won't go in there and enforce the law because apparently this administration doesn't either have the guts to change the law and make marijuana legal across the country, or to stand up to these forces and say, no, this is illegal, you can't use it. By the same token, we're talking about sanctuary cities. We say, people come here illegally and they get deported and then they come back and they commit crimes. If they commit crimes, they should go to jail and stay in jail. And the tragedy we just had in San Francisco is a perfect example of this. This gentleman apparently committed 7 previous felonies here in an undocumented status. And San Francisco continued to release him because they're a sanctuary city. No one should get sanctuary from a felony, from committing a felony in this country. And so I would advocate for and argue to the Congress for a law that says that no city, no subdivision of this country should be allowed to ignore the law. And that is whether it's a sanctuary city for committing crimes, if you're here in an undocumented status, or for marijuana, or for anything else that we've decided at the federal level. If Congress doesn't like the law, they can change it. But they want to have it both ways. They want to be able to come back to all of you and say, I didn't weaken the drug laws in this country. I didn't weaken the immigration laws in this country. But then when they watch the immigration laws being weakened, when they watch the marijuana laws being weakened, they do nothing about it. You can't have it both ways. So that's what I mean about just telling people the truth. If you're in favor of legalizing marijuana, then stand up and say it. Make your argument, try to make it the law of the country. If you don't, fight it. That's what this country's about. But what we're doing now is saying people can just pick and choose the laws they want. Listen, I fought against same-sex marriage in New Jersey, and I vetoed a law that would have legalized it. We got sued. It went up to the New Jersey Supreme Court. We fought it up to the New Jersey Supreme Court. The New Jersey Supreme Court ruled 7-0 that same-sex marriage should be allowed in New Jersey. Now, as governor, do I then have the right to go, no, I'm not going to do it? Because I disagree with it. Well, heck, man, I took an oath. The oath wasn't, I will enforce the laws that I agree with in the state of New Jersey. That wasn't it. It was, I shall enforce the laws that support the Constitution of the state of New Jersey. Not if I agree with it, not maybe, not when I feel like it. There are plenty of laws in my state that I don't agree with. My job is to try to change them. And if I don't change them, then I got to enforce them. Because that's the oath I took. That's the oath every member of Congress takes. That's the oath that every president takes. And so I don't believe in sanctuary cities. I think it's wrong. I think it's a reckless and intentional disregard of the law. And nobody who takes an oath, like a police officer, like a mayor, like members of a city council, should be able to just absolutely look people in the eye and say, I don't like that law, so I'm not enforcing it. And that's what sanctuary cities are, and that's why I'm against it.
Thank you for coming, Governor Christie. I really appreciate your time, as well as all the veterans here. Thank you for putting your lives on the line for our safety and our freedom. With that said, I've had some concerns recently. Over the last years, more and more things have been released as far as government documents that show that they have committed crimes against the people of this country. For example, Agent Orange, which we all know about, and that's happened for quite a while and is horrific. It just came out a couple days ago that in San Francisco and hundreds of other areas, hundreds of times in the country, the military has actually tried biowarfare tactics against us as tests, which has caused deaths. The best example recently that I can give that's most publicized is the NSA leaks from Edward Snowden, who showed that the government was illegally watching us basically and keeping track of our information. So that's a situation where you essentially have sanctuary pieces of government where they cannot be held accountable anymore for what they do. Now, here's my question. Edward Snowden, in this case, committed a crime, broke the law, in order to show that the people of this country were having crimes committed against them, that the citizens were having a crime. Does that make him a traitor, or does that make him a hero? And what would you do to protect us in the future so that that doesn't occur anymore?
Well, he's a traitor, and he did not prove that the law was broken. He didn't prove the law was broken. The NSA and the statute that the Congress enacted allowed the NSA to do exactly what they were doing. And what Edward Snowden did was an absolute act of self-aggrandizement that betrayed our country and put American lives at risk. And if it wasn't, why is the coward run off to Russia? If he believes that he wants to stand up for something he thinks is wrong in this country, then come here and stand and take your position. Instead, we now have Edward Snowden lecturing to us about freedom and liberty from Russia under the protective umbrella of Vladimir Putin, who is a KGB thug, and where there are little or no freedoms afforded to people of Russia. I don't have any tolerance for this. And I'll tell you this, I'm the only person in this race who's actually reviewed applications under the Patriot Act and knows what it's like to have to fight terrorism and interdict it before it happens. What Edward Snowden did was to make this country weaker and more vulnerable. That's what he did. And he put American lives of agents at risk around the world. And he did so in a cowardly way and then ran off. Ran off to protect his own hide. If you're really going to say you're going to stand up and be a hero to stand up for what he believed were civil liberties violations, then stand up and fight it and protect it in this country. Don't dump a bunch of documents to a media organization outside this country and then run outside this country and hide in Russia and then lecture me about protection of civil liberties. This can be done, right? This can be done in our country. We can protect civil liberties and interdict what we need to interdict in terms of terrorism. And you know what? If someone violates the law, they should be prosecuted by the Justice Department. If Congress has concerns about it, they should exercise their oversight ability. This is my argument with Senator Paul. Senator Paul is arguing about this. Do your job. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Don't take tools away from us that we need to be able to keep this country safe. Do your job. If you think people are stepping over the line, you have subpoena power on congressional committees, and you have oversight authority. Do your job. But instead, what Senator Paul wants to do is give speeches on the floor of the Senate, then cut that video, put it on the internet to raise money. Is that really in the interest of our country, or is that just in Senator Paul's personal political interest? So I have to tell you, as somebody who was appointed U.S. Attorney for the state of New Jersey by President Bush on September 10th, 2001, and that whole job changed the next day. When one of those planes took off from my state, and our state lost more people on 9/11 than any state in the country other than New York. Now, Mary Pat and I went to some of those funerals. We lost a friend of ours in our local parish. Our oldest son's best friend's dad was killed in the Trade Center that day. And I've watched that kid now for 13 years grow up without a dad. And I'm not going to forget those things. And so we need to find the right balance, absolutely. But the right balance is to put responsible people in charge of these things. And then when someone acts irresponsibly, to do what that guy said. You know, I'm not going to repeat that because not all you'll hear on the news. But to get them out of the position of responsibility and to prosecute them if they've broken the law. That's the right way to go about this, not by dumping confidential documents. He wanted to take those documents, take them to a prosecutor.
I agree, but my question is, what will you do to make sure that doesn't happen? Because
well, first of all, I think
did rule that.
Now, the Supreme Court hasn't ruled. There's a Circuit Court of Appeals, the Second Circuit Court of Appeals in New York, that ruled that they thought the NSA overstepped. That's going to go to the Supreme Court. We're going to find out what they think. I have to disagree with the Second Circuit opinion. So if I were president, I wouldn't do anything to change what the NSA did. I wouldn't do anything to change it because I don't think it's unlawful. And so I would fight to have the NSA be able to do what they did. By the way, let's make sure we know what the NSA did. They're not listening to your phone conversations. They're not reading your emails. They are taking large groups of telephone numbers and seeing if those telephone numbers match up and have contact with phone numbers of known terrorists. And if they do, then you know what happens? They don't get to get the records. Then they have to go to court and get a search warrant and go through the normal course of what you have to do. So, if you listen to Senator Paul and some of these other folks, they would have you believe that, we were listening to your conversation with Grandma. We don't care about your conversation with Grandma. Keep having it. Or your emails with your kids at college. I don't want to read them. I have no interest. But if you're having a conversation with a cell phone number of a known terrorist outside this country, then we better know. And remember this, if those things had been in place prior to 9/11, we would have known that terrorists from outside this country were contacting those folks who were taking flight lessons at a flight school in San Diego. Now, I don't know whether that would have prevented 9/11 or not. No one will ever be able to predict that. And anybody who tells you they know for sure is not telling you the truth. We don't know. But we would have had a better chance. We would have had a better chance. And I think that's what we need to be doing. So I disagree with the premise, but in the end, I think we're in the same place. People who violate the law should be prosecuted for it. Congress should oversee the right and just implementation of our laws. And if Edward Snowden wanted to be a hero, he should have turned that over to the Justice Department if he thought it was a violation of the law. Not turn it over to a British newspaper and then run to Russia to hide. That's a coward and a traitor, not a hero. But thanks for raising it because it's a really important issue. Really important issue.
Hi. I understand all these questions about the threats we feel to national security and all of that, and completely agree we're grateful for the service and people who keep us safe. But what I'm surprised by is we haven't heard anything tonight from you, and I would hope that we'll be able to address your thoughts on growing the economy, increasing jobs, and how we're going to balance the budget. Because if you drive through this area, there are many empty storefronts.
Yep.
Not just here, but in the area around. So please share your thoughts.
Sure, I appreciate you giving me the chance. And so I got lots of ideas I want to talk about, but I didn't want to give you a 45-minute speech at the top of this. It's a pretty warm room, and you didn't come here just to hear me, give a monologue. I wanted to hear what you care about. So let me address that. We put out a plan, by the way, 6 or 8 weeks ago now, on tax and regulatory reform to help to grow the economy. We don't have an income inequality problem in this country in and of itself. The income inequality problem, in my view, is created by an opportunity inequality problem. That we don't have enough opportunity in this country because the economy is growing at such a slow rate. This is the worst post-recession recovery since World War II. The president runs around and takes a victory lap for 2% growth. For 2% growth. And in fact, just this last month, consumer spending went down 0.3%. Because the consumers are saying, I'm not sure about this economy. And I don't want to spend all this money. I think I need to save a little bit more in case something bad happens again. And so we need to give confidence back to the American people again. Here's a few ways to do it. First is we need to simplify this tax system. The fact is that this tax system is built for the wealthiest in this country, not for middle-class folks. And so how many people really, I doubt few people in this room itemize their deductions. Most people take the standard deduction. And yet we have all these individual deductions and loopholes that are put into the tax code by the lobbyist, the woman who asked the question about the lobbyist. She comes to all of them and asks me that question, then she leaves. They're put in there and that continue to degrade people's confidence and faith in the tax system. They think it's rigged against them, and you know why? Because it is. It is. So here's what I say. We need to lower our tax rates. We should only have 3 rates. The top rate should be 28%, which is what the top rate was when Reagan did tax reform, in a bipartisan way with the senator from my state, Bill Bradley, who 28% top rate. The lowest rate should be in the single digits, 7 or 8%. Now, to afford to do that, to lower rates for everybody in this country, we need to get rid of almost all the deductions. I'd keep 2. The mortgage interest deduction on your home and the charitable contribution deduction. Those are the 2 I would keep. So we continue to encourage people to buy and own a home and make it affordable, and we continue to support the nonprofits in this country that do such great work to help the poor, the disadvantaged, and others who have problems. And other than that, everything else has got to go. And by the way, there's lots of good stuff in there that people like, so there'll be a huge fight over this. But it will lower rates for everybody in the country, and then you can do your taxes in 15 minutes. Literally. Imagine that. You get how much you made, deduct how much you paid in mortgage interest if you did, how much you contributed to charity if you did, get the bottom line number and multiply times one of the three rates, send your check and be done. Now, like, this is the part of the speech my father hates the most because he's a CPA. Yeah. They don't like this, but it's what we should do. And it'll give people greater confidence and put more money into the economy. Second, on the business side of things, we have the highest business tax rate in the world. 35%. Imagine the country that perfected the free enterprise system is the most unfriendly place to do business in the world from a tax perspective. So we need to get rid of a lot of their deductions and their special loopholes as well. And in return, we should lower the tax rate 10%, from 35 to 25. That'll put us right in the middle of the rest of the world. We don't have to be the lowest tax rate in the world because we're America and we offer a lot of other advantages to business in this country, but we can't be the most expensive. Because here's what's happened. $2 trillion of American companies' profits are sitting offshore. They made it in other countries, and we're one of the few countries in the world, including North Korea, that double tax. So if you pay tax in another country on profit and you want to bring it home to your home country, we tax it again at 35%. So you know what they're doing? Not bringing it home. They're not stupid. So 35% of zero, by the way, is zero. So what I say is, let's do this. Let's have a one-time repatriation of that money. They need to bring it home, and they have to promise they're going to invest it in American projects. And if they do, we'll tax them at 8.75%. Because, by the way, 8.75% of $2 trillion is a lot more than 35% of zero. And that money, that influx of money, of $2 trillion to come in, will really help to create opportunity and jobs in our country. Last piece is regulation. Last year, the Obama administration, in 2014, issued 81,000 pages of new federal regulation in 1 year. 81,000 pages. It's the most in 1 year of any president in history. And his own Small Business Administration has said that the cost of regulation, federal regulation on small business in this country, is $10,000 per employee. That's the hidden tax of regulation. Imagine if we cut that in half. Imagine we just cut that in half. How much money we get back into our economy to give people raises, to raise the incomes of middle-class folks, rather than spending on all this regulation. And so we need to do that. If I were president, on day one, I'd do what I did as day one as governor. Day one as governor of New Jersey, executive order number 1 was to freeze any new regulation from any department or agency for 90 days. And when I sent the lieutenant governor out to meet with businesses in public hearings around the state to hear from them, what are the most onerous, difficult, useless regulations that they put on you in the last 4 years when my predecessor was in place? In the first year, we got rid of 1/3 of the Corzine era regulations in New Jersey. And people felt immediate relief from that in the business community and were able to start to create jobs. I also would set a new rule, a net zero rule on regulation. So in the Christie administration, if we issued 1,000 pages of new regulation, we had to sunset 1,000 pages of regulation. So we don't add to the monster. If there's 1,000 new pages I need, there's got to be 1,000 pages I can find to get rid of that we don't need anymore. Last part of this is, this president has signed a lot of executive orders that have imposed all kinds of new restrictions on people across this country. During the transition, I would instruct the White House counsel's office in waiting to look at every one of those executive orders, and on the first day, have a pile of executive orders on my desk for me to consider to rescind some of the president's executive orders that have made it more difficult to grow this economy. That would send a clear signal not only to the country, but to the bureaucracy in Washington, that there was a new sheriff in town. A new sheriff in town, someone who was going to put the interests of business first. I'll give you one other example of what we did in New Jersey. Our Department of Environmental Protection was run by the woman who Barack Obama put in charge of the EPA, a woman named Lisa Jackson. So I know what it's like to clean up the mess made by Barack Obama's appointees, because it happened in New Jersey. When I put a new DP commissioner in there, I hired a partner from the Accenture firm who had a specialty in the environment to be in charge. And I said, Bob, go run this thing like a business. One of the first things he did was I think it's about 4,500 employees in the Department of Environmental Protection. He made all of them go to mandatory customer service training. He said, these people who call on the phone are our customers. The businesses, the citizens of this state who want a permit, who want to expand their business there, are customers. You need to learn how to treat them like customers, not like problems. Imagine 4,500 environmental regulators going to customer service training. It sent a very clear message in that department that there was a new attitude in how we treated people. All those things will help to grow our economy. Here's what we don't need. What we don't need is more people in cubicles in Washington, D.C. deciding the winners and losers. That's what we don't need. And so I believe that the people of this country are the folks to make the best decisions about how to grow our economy. And what the government needs to do is to lower taxes and get out of the way. And I mean lower taxes for everybody. And stop the special interest gambit on all these deductions and loopholes that only benefit the rich. The most ironic thing about the president's rhetoric is that he talks about income inequality all the time. And the income gap has grown greater in his 7 years as president. The rich have done better than they did under George W. Bush. And the middle class has gone backwards because of his policies. He's had control of this thing for the last 6.5 years. So we need to change that, and we need to put the people in charge. So that's the way I would do it. I'm glad you asked about it, because I decided to skip it off the top. Because damn, it's hot in here. You've been sitting here for a while. So, but I'm glad you asked it. And I think it's really important for us to have a new approach to this, because the current approach just isn't working. And I'll tell you this, if you listen to Hillary Clinton's speech on the economy the other day, it could be 4 more years of the same, everybody, just with a different tone of voice. That's all. It'll be the same program. So my staff said I can take 1 more question, which means I will take 2, because I want them to know that I am still the boss. Right? So, ma'am, right here.
Mine's about education.
Yes, ma'am.
I have, first off, I do want to say that everything you said about correction, I'm going to go home and tell my husband, and he's going to actually agree with you on something. So, and Scotty knows my husband well, who runs the county corrections.
All right, that's good.
So, but I want to talk to you about education.
Sure.
I have a senior in college. She didn't stay in this state. She didn't stay in this state because her state college here in this state was $7,000 a year more expensive than the private college she was going to. But the student loans she's got and the student loans we have from that are rough. And it means that instead of just working until we're 62, because my husband did 20 years in the military, now it's 65, 67. So what do you, I mean, student loan costs have gone up over 1,000%. What are we going to do about student loans and the fact that she's a bright girl? She deserves a good education and a lot of
Sure. Well, listen, first off, I'm glad you asked the question, because this would have been the first town hall I've done in New Hampshire out of 12 where someone didn't ask about student debt. And I was waiting. My son was going to ask about it. We've gone 11 for 11. So now we've got 12 for 12. I have a few ideas on this that I laid out in the speech that I gave at Iowa State University a few weeks ago. First is this. You should be able to renegotiate the rates on your student loans. We can renegotiate our car loan. We can renegotiate our mortgage. Why can't we renegotiate our student loan? It doesn't make any sense. If rates are lower than when we borrow, we should be able to renegotiate with the lender. And we're not allowed to do that. It makes no sense. We should change that. That's the first thing that'll lower kind of the carry costs. But that's not really the problem. In my view, the real problem is the colleges and universities in this country. Because there has been no market forces on them to contain their costs. Because of what you just said. So like, for instance, if they raise their tuition 6%, their view is, well, you can just borrow it, right? And the loans are out there for you to borrow, and so there's no market pressure on them. Let me give you an example that's personal. I'm a senior in college too. Mary Pat and I have our son Andrew, will be a senior at Princeton this fall. Our daughter Sarah is at summer school right now at Notre Dame. And so, I don't know, about 8-9 weeks ago, we got a letter from the University of Notre Dame. Wonderful letter. From Father Jenkins, the president of Notre Dame. And the first paragraph went something like this. We want to thank you for the great blessing you've bestowed upon us by entrusting the souls of your children to us for their education, right? I mean, this is from a priest at Notre Dame, right? So, like, you could hear the theme from Rudy playing in the background, right? Just close your eyes, you can see the Golden Dome, touchdown Jesus, the whole thing, right? Your heart's pounding, this is great. Of course, the next paragraph is the money paragraph, right? The next paragraph is, and that's why we're pleased to tell you, that next year tuition will only increase 3.9%. Now, remember, inflation's like 1.5%. So it's going up double, or more than double, the inflation rate. And then he says, that's the lowest rate of increase of tuition at Notre Dame in 40 years. 4% a year is the lowest increase in annual tuition Notre Dame's had in 40 years. He then concludes the paragraph by saying, so next year's total student cost will be $61,750. Yeah, exactly. $61,750. Now here's the problem, right? The problem is, let's say Mary Pat and I decided, you know what? At $61,750, Notre Dame's just not worth it anymore. It's not worth it. And wait a second, now, right, we're going to go sit down with Sarah, right? Who loves Notre Dame, who texts me pictures from campus as she's walking around. There's the Golden Dome. There's the library. Isn't my campus beautiful? I love this place. Dad, I love it so much. I'm so happy here, right? I'm going to sit her down at the kitchen table and go, you know, at $61,750, your mother and I no longer think it's a value for us. And so I'm not going to name another university because any other university I name, I will offend, right? So now you're going to go someplace else that's cheaper. Any of you who have teenage girls, and this would apply to our son too. After the yelling, the screaming, the crying, the slamming of the door, and the "I can't believe you're doing this and ruining my life" speech, right? You know what Mary Pat and I are doing. We're writing the check. Because what we care about the most is what you said at the end of your question. She's a bright girl, and she deserves to have the education that's going to make her maximize her life, give her the greatest opportunity she can possibly have, right? That's what we all want as parents for our kids. We want something better for them than we had. And we want them to be able to do it. They know it. The colleges know it. They're schooling us, man. They know we can't say no. They know we're not going to say no. And so they just keep jacking up the price. Here's what I think we need to do. Two things. One, have you ever found in your life a more opaque bill than a college bill? Right? Less detail. 3 lines, right? Tuition, room and board, other fees. Now, if you all went out tonight in Franklin, which I'm sure the mayor's hoping you do, and you went to a local restaurant or whatever for dinner, let's say a group of you got together, and 6 of you went out, and the bill came back and it was $100. And all it said was food, $100. Right? You grab the waiter, right? You go, hey, come over here, buddy. Listen, could you tell me exactly how much what we got here costs? You know, we're splitting up the bill, and I don't know whether my, chicken was more than his pasta or whatever, and we're trying to split up the bill amongst each other. Can I have some more detail? Yet, tuition, room and board, other fees, $61,750. I go, where do I send the check? I didn't ask, right? So first off, we need them to detail these things. We need them to detail out what they're spending their money on. Maybe we don't need 40 vice presidents in charge of paperwork at colleges anymore. I made this joke. I thought it was a joke, right? I said, maybe if you knew that 2% of the tuition went to the building of the rock climbing wall, maybe you wouldn't pay for that part of it. You wouldn't want to pay for that part of it. My daughter Sarah was with us up here in New Hampshire when I made that joke. She tapped me. She goes, we already have a rock climbing wall. So then I went to Iowa State to give this speech, and a group of Iowa State students sitting behind me, and I told the story about Sarah and the rock climbing wall, and one kid goes, we have one too. We're paying for the rock climbing wall, man. I mean, listen, I don't know that has anything that's integral to my daughter's education in the business school at Notre Dame. She's got a rock climbing wall. And by the way, I know our daughter. She ain't climbing the rock climbing wall. I'd say for sure she's not using it. Which leads me to my second idea. We need to unbundle these costs so that you can look at them and your child can look at them and say, you know what? Maybe your child says, I just want to go to school, get my meal plan, and I got nothing else I want. I'm going to study. I'm not going to take the rest of this stuff, and because I don't want to pay for it. You should have the option not to pay for these things. That's a market test. Because if 80% of the students decided not to pay for the rock climbing wall, guess what? The rock climbing wall wouldn't be there because they wouldn't have the money for it. You should be able to pick that. And here's the hammer. Because we're from New Jersey. So there's always got to be a hammer, right? Here's the hammer. If you're not willing to detail the bill and you're not willing to unbundle it, you cannot participate in federal student loan programs and you can't participate in the federal grant programs. You're going to use taxpayer money. You're going to use taxpayer money, then you need to be part of the team here. You need to be part of Team America. And you can't be jacking up the cost to parents and to students. We have students walking out with hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt. That means they can't buy a house, they can't buy a car, they can't get married because they're paying off their first mortgage, which is for their college tuition. That's the way I think we should approach it. And I think if we did, we'd shame them into not spending some money, and we'd get the choice then of what we want to pay for and what we don't. We need to apply a market test. You had something to follow up?
Well, what do you feel about the students actually giving back and getting loans, money taken off?
Absolutely an option. Absolutely an option that we should consider is the forgiveness of certain amounts of loans for service to our country, whether it's military service to our country, whether it's community service to our country. There are plenty of ways we could do it. And I'm absolutely happy to consider that part of it. But I don't think it goes to the cost issue. The cost issue offends me, and it offends you. But I absolutely have no opposition to that at all either. I think we should encourage our students to do that. And if that's a way for them to walk away from part of that debt by contributing their services, their hard work, then we are getting something in return for what we paid for, which is their service to improve their community, their state, their country. So yeah, I would be in favor of that too. Absolutely. All right, we can take one more. Let's do this gentleman right here, because Matt's standing right behind you with the microphone. So.
It seems as though you may have some competition now as the candidate who's telling it like it is. I wonder if you could briefly compare and contrast what you see it as versus the
Well, first off, a disclaimer, okay? Mary Pat and I met Donald Trump 13 years ago. I was the U.S. Attorney for New Jersey. Donald Trump's older sister is a Third Circuit Court of Appeals judge in the federal court in New Jersey. And the way I first met Donald Trump was I went over to see Judge Mary Ann Trump Barry, the Third Circuit Court of Appeals judge who used to work in the U.S. Attorney's Office. And she called me over to have a meeting with me as I started the job in January of 2002 to kind of give me her advice on running the office. She spent a lot of her career there. She's an absolutely spectacular woman. She's really great. Wonderful lady, Mary Ann, and a little bit different than her brother. In terms of the way she presents herself. Wonderful woman. And at the end of the meeting, she said to me, by the way, I need you to do a favor for me. I said, sure, Judge, whatever I can do for you. She said, are you willing to go out to dinner with my little brother? Now, I'm thinking to myself, her little brother, right? I said, are you talking about Donald? And she said, yeah, Donald's my little brother. I said, sure, if your little brother wants to go out to dinner with you, then I'm happy to go out to dinner with him. So, a week or two later, I went out to dinner with Donald Trump, and from that moment forward, we became friends. Mary Pat and I were at his wedding to Melania in January of 2005. Let me tell you what a show that was. Everybody from Shaquille O'Neal to Billy Joel to Tony Bennett and me and Mary Pat. And we've remained friends ever since. So let me start off by saying I like Donald Trump. And I think in his heart he's a really good person. And so we got to give that disclaimer first. Now, I'm running for president, and so is he. I think I'd be a better president than Donald Trump. And I think based on my experience and what I've done, the ideas I've put forward, I know he says he tells it like it is too. And I tell it like it is from the point of actually having done these jobs. And I think, quite frankly, Donald would be a little frustrated if he became president of the United States. I've worked with the Democratic legislature for 6 years. I wake up every morning with a 24-16 deficit in the Senate and a 48-32 deficit in the lower house, which means I wake up every morning knowing I'm not getting everything I want. And so my job is to learn how to compromise. It's what the sheriff talked about in his introduction. I have learned over the course of the last 6 years how to stand for your principles, but also to reach out to the other side and work with you. We need that in Washington. You cannot look at the Speaker of the House and say, you're fired. As much as you might like to. You can't look at Harry Reid or Mitch McConnell and say, you're fired, if you don't get what you want, right? Mary Pat's like, that was funny? I got a rise out of my wife for the first time tonight. Because, man, she's been listening to this act for 30 years, right? She thought she had heard it all, but she actually liked that part. So I think that Donald's saying some important things in this race, and he's talking about, the dysfunction of government and people's frustration about it, and he's right about that. And he talks about wanting to make America great again, and I agree with him. We should. I just think I'm much better positioned to help make America great again than he is. But you're not going to hear, and I disagree with some of the things he says, and I've said that, but I'm not going to repeat those things over and over again. All the press wants to do is ask me about what Donald said about the Mexicans. What do you feel about that? Well, I've answered that 15 times. And I told them, not one person in a town hall meeting since he made those comments has asked me about the comments. They asked me about Donald. They don't ask me about the comments. That's a media thing. So Donald says what he thinks. I don't think he's the best guy for president. I think you're looking at the best guy for president. So, but I will tell you this. I flew in tonight. I was doing an event in Camden, as I said earlier today. So I flew in from Philadelphia tonight on American Airlines to Manchester. I got off my plane and I started to walk through the airport. I was at the one end of the Manchester airport. I started to walk through. I looked out the windows and I saw that huge jet with Trump on the side of it coming. Right, and I went, okay, that's another way to get here. That's another way to get here. All right, I guess that works too. So that's what I feel about him. Like I said, I feel like he's a good person, and I've had a great relationship with him over the years. But I'm going to run as hard as I can against him and try to convince all of you that I'm the better, more responsible person to be more successful as President of the United States. And that's the way we should be having this argument and discussion. We shouldn't be having it based upon personal things and all the rest. We should have it based on who is the best person to lead our country. And so I know him. I probably know him better than anybody else in this race knows him, because I've known him for a long time. And that's why I can tell you, I think he's got a good heart. I really do. But I also disagree with him on a bunch of things, and I think I'm better qualified to be President of the United States than he is. So thank you for asking about Donald Trump. That's a good thing. I appreciate it very much. Let me just say a couple of things to you before you go. First is thank you. When people ask me about what it's like, because I've been in New Hampshire more than any other candidate. And so I get a lot of people who ask me all the time, like, what's it like campaigning in New Hampshire? I said, these are some of the most amazing people in the world, because it is July of 2015, right? It is 7 months before anybody's going to vote in New Hampshire, and these people are coming to town hall meetings in the heat to ask really good questions. Listen to these questions tonight. I mean, he's asking me detailed questions about the NSA and spying and all the rest of it. She's asking me about education reform. We're asking about the military and veterans and military spending and preparedness. I mean, you folks are impressive. You're impressive because you care so much about your country that you're willing to spend the time on a Thursday night to come out here and to listen to somebody who you're, I hope, except for the lady who was sitting there, actively considering for President of the United States. Except for her. I think it's fairly safe to say that I'm not getting her vote. Most of the rest of you are in play. It's not a lost night. So you're impressive, and I want to thank you. I really do. I want to thank you all for coming and spending your time here. It means a lot to me. It means a lot to Mary Powell. The last thing I want to tell you is this. It's hard to make this decision about who to vote for. Especially in our party where there's going to be 15 or 16 or 17, I can't even count anymore, people offering themselves for president. You have a huge responsibility. You have a huge responsibility. And, you can ask me about all these separate different issues about creating jobs and all the rest of the things that I got to ask about tonight. Sanctuary cities and all these different things. And I can answer you very specifically, and I've tried to answer you very specifically and very honestly and very directly, not evade any of your questions. But you can't anticipate every issue that's going to come before a president. There are going to be things that are going to happen that we can't anticipate. And so when you're making the final decision about who to vote for president, you can't, I'd suggest to you respectfully, just look at a white paper and what are my positions on the issues versus Donald's versus anybody else's, and then say, well, I agree with more of those issues, therefore I'm going to vote for that person. There's more to it than that, right? Because you can't anticipate every issue. You got to know who the person is. where they're from, what they believe. Because if you don't know that, you're going to miss that last element of this decision, which is when something really tough happens, and it comes to that office where it's going to come. How's that person going to react? Who are they? And so I want to end by telling you who I am. You know, I'm the son of an Irish father and a Sicilian mother. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with this dynamic, let me just say this. This made me, as the oldest child in that family, expert at an early age at dispute resolution. Now, I don't want to say that my mother was argumentative, because that would not be nice. But let me just say that my mother never found an argument that wasn't worth having. And that's the way she raised us, right? My mother used to say to us all the time, in this house, there will be no suffering in silence. You got a problem? I want to hear about it. If I don't hear about it, I can't fix it. If you don't give me a chance to fix it, don't bother me. I want to talk to you. I want to hear from you. It was a requirement in our house. My poor dad was just like great, affable. He's 82 years old, in great health. Irish backslapping, hugging guy. If you were here tonight, he'd get up, he'd hug every one of you. He'd tell you some embarrassing stories about me. But I used to tease him. I'm like, Dad, in the automobile of life, you are merely a passenger. Right? Mom is the driver, man. She's telling us what to do. And it used to get crazy because she lived that, you know, no suffering in silence thing herself. You know, she would tell us whenever she had any problem with us. And when we got older, we finally got to like, Mom, enough, okay? I get it. And she said, no. You're going to hear this. You're going to hear it now. I need to get it off my chest. There will be no deathbed confessions in this family, Christopher. You're hearing it now. So we did it over time. That's the way we lived. That's the way she raised us. That was the house that she ran. Now, my dad's 82 years old now. He's still living in New Jersey. I don't know if we're live streaming this thing tonight or not. Are we live streaming this thing? Yes. So Dad is watching. I guarantee you, Dad's at home in front of the computer. Good evening, Dad. I'm talking about you. He's watching. He's totally into this. You can only imagine. You know, when we announced a couple of weeks ago, 2 weeks ago actually today, in my old hometown, in the high school gym where I went to school, I looked up in the bleachers and saw my father, like I used to look up in the bleachers when we played there. But now, I'm looking up at the bleachers and I'm telling people I want to be President of the United States. I can't imagine what that was like for my dad. And he's a wonderful, wonderful man to have at my side as we're going down this road, as he has been for my whole life. My mom, unfortunately, is no longer with us. My mom passed away 11 years ago. And she was a lifetime smoker. And on Valentine's Day in 2004, she was diagnosed with lung cancer. And for any of you who've gone through this, you know that sometimes it goes slow, sometimes it goes quickly. For my mom, it went very quickly. And by the end of April of 2004, she was in really tough shape. And I was at the U.S. Attorney's National Conference in San Diego, where all the U.S. attorneys were together. And my younger brother called me, and he said, listen, Mom, no turn for the worse. They put her back in the hospital. Like, if you want to see her, you need to come now, because we just don't know. So I got on the red-eye flight that night. I flew back from San Diego to New Jersey, landed at Newark Airport, got in a car, drove over to the hospital where she was. And they had started to give her morphine. Any of you who've gone through this with the loss of a family member or friend, you know that's the end. They're trying to make them comfortable. They're trying to just keep them calm so that they don't have to suffer. But it also makes you kind of go in and out of things, right? So I sat there for a little while and waited for her to come to, and then she eventually did. And it was so typical of my mother, right? She hadn't seen me for a week. And she didn't say hello. She said, what day is it? Like, hi, Mom, how are you? It's Friday. She said, what time is it? I said, it's 9:30 in the morning. She said, go to work. I said, well, Mom, I decided to take the day off. I took the day off. I flew in California. I took the day off, and I'm going to spend it with you. And she said to me, Christopher, it is a work day. Go to work. I'm like, Mom, like, what are you afraid of not getting your taxpayers' money's worth today? Like, it'll be all right. I'll make the time up. Don't worry. I'm spending the day with you. She reached over. She grabbed my hand. She said to me, Christopher, go to work. It's where you belong. There's nothing left unsaid between us. It was the most empowering moment of my life. She was giving me permission to let her go. And she was right. All that stuff she had done that drove me crazy as a kid, all this no suffering, silence, She even said there'll be no deathbed confessions. She was right. See, because every grievance had been aired. She had told me everything about me that bothered her, and I had told her everything about her that bothered me. And more important than that, she had told me how much she loved me, and I knew that. And she laid in that bed, and she knew how much I loved her. So I stood up, I kissed her on the forehead, and I said, I'm going to work. And I went to work, and that afternoon she went into a coma, and she died 3 days later. It was the last words that we ever said between us. And I have no regrets, everybody. No regrets at all, because it was done. And it was okay. And I tell you that story because I'm one of the most psychoanalyzed politicians in America, right? Everybody says, they're writing all the time, why does he say the things he says? Why does he do the things he do? Why does he say it the way he says it? Can you believe he actually said that? Right? You've seen it, you've heard it. That's why. That's why. Because that's the way she raised me. And I know that if my mom were alive today to watch this circus that my life has become, she would say two things to me for sure. Lots of other things too, but two things for sure. First, she'd say to me, so, you're running for president. You're a real big shot. Don't act like a big shot with me, buddy. I changed your diapers. I know you. Keep your feet on the ground. My mother would want me to keep my humility. She would want me not to be over-affected by all this. And then the second thing I know she'd say to me is, if you're really asking these people to give you the most precious thing they can give you outside of their family, their vote to be the leader of their country, then you better tell them everything. You better tell them everything you think and everything you feel. Because in a trusting relationship, that's what I taught you to do. And you're asking them to trust you with the most important job that they can trust anybody with, outside of their family. And so that's why I am the way I am. That's why we have that slogan. That's why I'm standing here and answering all these questions. That's why I got in the back and forth with that empty chair who used to have a woman in it. That's why I do these things, right? I do it because I don't want you to wonder. 7 years ago, we voted for hope and change. We voted for a bumper sticker. We voted for hope and change. We can't do that again. You need to know what you're buying when you buy it. When you go into that voting booth in February in New Hampshire and you're looking at all those names, you need to know, if I push that button, who is that person and what am I getting in return? Here are the three things you're never going to have to wonder about me. You're never going to wonder what I'm thinking. You're never going to have to wonder what I'm feeling. You're never, ever going to have to wonder what I'm willing to fight for and how hard I'm willing to fight for it. Those are the three things that I'll promise you as I run for President of the United States. And if you give me your support and your help, I really believe that I can make you proud to be an American, and proud that this government will fight for you and the things that will make our children, our grandchildren's lives better. So I hope you give me the chance to do that, and thanks for coming tonight.